Alright, hey guys, Mitch here, and today I am going to just talk about the Quneo and what it can do for you, what it can't. I guess I just want to have a conversation because I am trying my best to want to keep it because of a lot of things that it can do, but I just can't seem to figure out how to get it to fit in my workflow, and you don't have an iOS editor, and so I always have to bring it back, plug it into my computer, make some changes, plug it back into my iPad, see if it worked. You know, there's a lot of, once you got a setup going, you really wouldn't have to do a whole lot of stuff because it does have 16 banks of presets that you can have. And each of those can house a whole bunch of information. You can control 2 or 3 things. There's probably enough here to control 2 or 3 things if you wanted to. But so I just want to, I kind of had a request too, if I could go over a few things in the editor, and so I'm going to do that. Some things that I've learned over the past really couple days that I've really trying to make a decision on if I want to keep it or not, to see really what it'll do. And so each of these horizontal sliders here, Derek Jones over in the AudioBus forum said, was talking about the iConnect Audio 4 Plus or any of the iConnect Audio, and he said to strip it. I think he was talking about just stripping it down and only making the connections that you need. And I would say the same thing about with the Quneo, is to turn everything off, so that way you know everything is off and only transmit what you need to transmit. And so, like here on this horizontal slider, if you don't want to send a note, make sure you turn it off. If you don't want to send pressure, make sure you turn it off. If you just want to send location, then there's your location. And so this right here is going to send this is going to send a note. And you can see it changing as I change. It'll change to the different notes. These bottom 2, pressure and location, are always going to send a CC value, from what I can tell. Okay, and then these 2 buttons over here, you can enable bank switching, and this will, as you toggle between them, it'll toggle between the 4 banks. And so this one horizontal slider, when this bank enable is selected, is 4 different sliders depending on the number that you press over. And it gives you good light indications on which one is selected. And so this one would correspond with that one, and that one. And so that really, these 4 become 16 different sliders with bank enable selected. So that's substantial. You got, and the form factor, as small as this thing is, you've got 16, but potential 16 horizontal sliders. The same with the vertical sliders. You have 16 vertical sliders. The same with these 2 rotary type knobs. You could enable bank switching on here, and you could have 4 banks of 4 different rotary knobs that you can go on. So it's pretty. That would be a whole entire rack full of stuff, and a very compact unit that will be powered. That will, don't require any additional power. You can plug it right straight into your iPad. Now, I will note that when it is plugged in straight from your iPad with just a standard camera connection kit, that sometimes, depending on the preset and depending on the LED lights, some settings, when you put them on, they'll stay on. And if that's the case, if you turn on all the pads, it will use too much power because the LEDs will pull too much power. So just keep that in mind. I was playing around with a Berlin patch for Gadget, and I went into the pads and I just turned all these to 1, and I turned off local LED control. And so I don't get I turned off all the lights on the pads. because for whatever reason there was a I was playing around with the different XY values and stuff, and somehow the pads were staying on, and so I just turned everything off so that way I didn't pull too much power and cause it to stop working. And so let me think. Another cool feature that I do like is enable bank switching on the pads. And so I have this one over here set up as bank switching on the pads. And as you bank switch, you can have it go, if you had all of these set to pads in chromatic order, you could go 8, 16, 32, 48, and it would transpose all the pads accordingly. And so you could have a 48, I guess essentially a 16 times 16, which is what? Do the math. 16 pads, well, times, I guess 4. Wouldn't be 16, would it? So you have a 64 note controller. 16, I guess that's right. 16 times 4, yeah, 64 notes. So you could have 64 different chromatic notes. So you have a 64 key keyboard right here at your fingertips. Obviously you can only play 16 at a time, but you can transpose it up, and you can just transpose it up and down, and it'll transpose it yourself. And I guess that'll bring me to my next point. Is it seems to need an intermediary device in order to get its full potential. I have a video where I use ScaleGen in order to translate a chromatic keyboard to direct note mapping in ScaleGen so that I can play whatever scale I have set in ScaleGen. And then from ScaleGen, I can send that to whatever app that I'm trying to control, say, Gadget. And then I can play the 16 pads on the Quneo and get whatever scale ScaleGen is. And there's Max for Live devices, I think. A lot of Ableton stuff. So if I had the full version of Ableton, it may sell me more to keep it, because I know there's a lot of extra stuff written in the kind of Max for Live scripting and some of the scripting stuff that you can do with the full version of Ableton, that you can turn it into whatever you want to. But for the iPad, you have to have another app open, which in turn pulls a little bit more of the resources down for the iPad that could be needed to be used for other things. And my iPad Air 1 is not old, but it's, as each update happens, it's starting to show its age a little bit. And so I'm trying to think what else. So you can only bank select between these, and these. And so one of these you have to not bank select between, because you don't have that many options, because these will only bank select between the horizontal options. So I'm trying to think what else. Another thing I do like is the grid mode in the pads. And like I said before, if you don't want to send a note, turn the note off. And so right here, I have the pressure and I have it set to 127. That way it's like a toggle button. And so I just basically turned all the top 8 pads into 16 toggle buttons, which would be useful if you're doing something like controlling some things in Loopy, to where you could, if you had, you could have 8 loops, and then you could toggle each one of these corners. Could be like a record, mute, solo, overdub kind of buttons. Record, mute, solo, overdub. And so you could do that for the 8 up here. And then with these bottom 8, you could enable notes, turn the pressure off, because you don't need to send a CC message. Let me go ahead and do that. Turn the pressure off. And then unless you're just wanting to send unless you're just wanting to send to XY pad, you know, turn those off, because say you just want to use these as a drum rack. Well, then if you enable bank switching here on the pads, these are going to stay the same because the notes are off, and so it'll transmit the note. It will transpose the notes, but not the CC values. And so these in turn will become like static buttons. And then these 8 down here, you could translate those 8, you could transpose them up 8 more, transpose them up 8 more, and 8 more. And you could turn those 8 into 24 pads. Is that right? Yep. 8 times 4 is 24. Yep. So it would turn those into 32. It'll turn those into 32 different pads, and so that's pretty awesome. You know, you could change the channels to these 8 down here to channel 10, and have all the rest of them, you know, transmit to channel 1. And so you have, this could be controlling a drum app or some other app that you have, you know, some drum samples on, or it don't have to be drum samples. It could be, you know, you could play notes in a scale. You got 8 notes, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 in a scale. So that would be helpful, and you'd have it, and you wouldn't have to be constantly switching between more banks, because you can switch between banks if you just press the little circle button up here, and then whatever bank you select, it'll change to that preset. And you can do it pretty quick on the fly, but you just have to, you know, kind of get into the workflow. Okay, so I guess the more I talk about it, the more I sell it back to myself, but then it all looks good on paper and it all looks good in a video until you actually start trying to use it. And then it can start having issues. And now this don't have any issues. I mean, it's responsive. It's not accurate. It's not as accurate as like a 100 millimeter, 60 millimeter fader would be, as far as increments of values that you can get. But for a live setting where you're not trying to program intricate little numbers, if you're just trying to do some live XY stuff with like the the Tornado or something like that, you know, you could set 4 of these pads up to be the 4 XY pads, and then just play around with that. Works really great. So it's not necessarily for precision. It's more it would be more geared for live use. And the pads, they're pretty velocity sensitive. Now I wouldn't, I don't know if I'd bet my money on trying to be the world's fastest finger drummer with the Quneo, but I mean it's responsive enough for live use. And if it's not getting the response that you need, you can always just turn it to 127, and it'll always output 127, and then you can go in and adjust it if you want to. So I guess that may be it. I know, I mean, there's so much to cover in this editor that you can do, but hopefully I kind of hit a good round about editor, or good roundabout information on the editor, and kind of give you some pros and cons on the Quneo and stuff. So thanks for watching. Leave a comment below to if you have a Quneo, and maybe if you have some videos out there or some best practices, things that you like about it, don't like about it. Let me know, because I'm really thinking about putting it on Craigslist for to trade for something. Maybe someone has another piece of gear that they don't want, that they don't fit in their workflow, and the Quneo will fit, and what they have will fit my workflow. That would be great. But thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys later.